and then I'll bring you on. Yo, what's going on tonight? Want to introduce, thank you all for joining us on Fathers Read 65 Live, Fathers Read 365 TV Live. This is our first late night live interview session. We're going to be doing a lot more of these, either myself, Mr. B, or my partner, Mr. A. Want to give a shout out to Mr. A, Keith Staples, co-founder of Fathers Read 365. And just wanted to start having some more engaging topics around fathers engaging in education, fathers engaging in general. We do Fathers Read 365. If you don't know, it's a fathers initiative that engages dads in the community in early literacy. We do it by going into daycare centers and reading and providing resources. It started with us just going in trying to be champions of literacy. It actually developed into now we're going as far as doing early screening, surveying children and their family, trying to find early signs of possible reading struggles, and then addressing them, and also providing resources to the daycare centers in many other ways, and also the family. So if you want to check us out, please check us out at fathersread365.org. You can also check us out on all social media platforms at Fathers Read 365. On year 9, this is not something that we just started. This is something that we've been passionate about for 9 years, and been working hard in the city of Philadelphia and the surrounding areas. However, tonight we want to talk about uh, how dads stay engaged when they don't live with their kids. And this is a great topic because I work in schools and just living in a community. We know a lot of times that families may not always be together, right? They may not always be that traditional in-home unit, but families need to still engage and show up together. And whether it's the mother or the father who's outside the home, um, both parents need to stay engaged. But that can be an issue, and for various different reasons. And tonight, I wanted to bring on my partner in this work. He's all this math. He's Akil Parker, originally from Baltimore. I believe he graduated from Morgan. I've met Akil doing the work. I met Akil in the streets, literally doing this type of work. I know we performed uh, at his daughter's daycare. And I remember that's the first time we physically met. I think we was actually friends on Facebook a little bit prior to that. But he introduced himself at the school. His daughter and my son was going to the same daycare at the time. And that's how we met. And I've always been impressed by Akil as a father and also as an educator, a man of our community. He started a channel, All This Math. And I got to learn from Akil because Akil, I believe, have over 7,000 followers to this day. We're not there yet, but Akil speaks a lot on in different platforms, podcasts, conferences. He's a very well versed brother in education. Math is his thing, but he also understands the power of education overall. Again, he's from Baltimore. He reps Baltimore, but he's been in Philly for a while. We gotta talk about that. I got gotta see, you know. How much of Philly he really claims. But we're going to get into a couple questions around the topic: how dads stay engaged when they don't live with their kids. And actually, this topic was sparked by a post I Kill created years ago. With Without any more said, well, what they say, further said, whatever they say, I want to bring on my brother Akil Parker tonight to join us in this conversation. Akil, thank you for joining us, brother. Um, Pleasure having you on tonight.
Yeah, man, I'm glad to be here, man. I'm always up for these types of conversations, man.
You are, and we've always run hand in hand, naturally because you do the math, we do the reading, and that just runs hand in hand, math and reading. And so tonight, I kind of intrigued you a little bit before the show started. Told you that there was a post that you made on Facebook in 2018, September 2018. I'm gonna read this post to you real quick. See if you remember it. I got my notes here. So I won't say the name. When blank was younger, I learned that one remedy for, excuse me, let me start here. All right. Brothers that may be dealing with parental alienation from your child's mother. When blank was younger, I learned that one remedy for this was to attempt to develop a positive relationship with the school he attended. I will pull up and go to the main office and have them call him downstairs. And we'll sit and chop it up for a minute in the main office. You can also visit your child at school morning drop offs or dismissal time. Also, some schools will allow you to shadow your child during the school day or during certain classes. You can also volunteer to chaperone field trips and other school excursions. You can reach out to teachers and offer to give educational presentations to his class during the school day. Parental alienation is real, and these are some things I have successfully done in the past to circumvent it proactively that minimize some of its negative effect. Even without parental alienation, these are things we should be doing in schools anyway. I hope this helps somebody out there and share for other brothers out there that won't see my page. So that's the post that got us here today.
Remember that.
Um,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
okay, and I want you to know, I kill and Keith can be attested is that I use this example ever since then because we got just got started in 2017. So this post came a year later, and ever since then, when engaging with fathers or in some speaking engagements, I always reference um that statement you made.
Yeah, and that's it's lived experience. That I pass wanted to pass on to the people. I hope a lot of people can benefit from that advice. Because if nobody told you that you could do that, you might not even know. You might not take. You might not consider ever doing that.
One of the things I really harp on when I do kind of regurgitate what you say is the school trips, right? That's something that's simple. It's something that you don't necessarily have to feel like you have to be like this educator or help with some lesson or something. Like you can just go have fun and be yourself, especially some school trips. It may be something that you went to before or have prior knowledge in. So yes, a lot of parents don't know that they can. A lot of men don't know that they can just come to the office and request, hey, I'm so and so's father. I want to see my son, right? For whatever reason. Like you don't have to have a reason to say, hey, I want to have a minute with him. You know what I'm saying? My son or my daughter. And it doesn't have to be this long. It could just be, hey, glad to see you, give them a hug and kiss, because you may not have the opportunity to do it because you're not in the home, but you can still every morning show up there, maybe do a hug and kiss. Hey, have a good day, give some type of positive reaffirmation or something of such. So really want to start Keith and I, when we started Fathers Read 365, one of the things we agreed on early was a tagline, changing the narrative. So a lot of what these conversations we'll be having is around that, right? Changing the narrative and also empowering brothers and just the community in general around ways that we can stay engaged in education. So from that post, from this topic, I created some questions I wanted to go through with you. Um, I thought of just having a regular conversation, but sometimes when I have regular conversations, I get into the conversation and kind of miss points that I really want to get to. You know what I'm saying? So build some yeah, it happens all the time. And I end up I'm like, damn, I should have said this. Really wanted to ask that. So I built in some key points I want to touch on and throw some questions at you around this topic and see what you got to say. The first one would be what made you write that post? If you can remember, and was there a specific moment or situation with your son that led to it?
About and used to think about when I was in that situation. Fortunately, me and his mother are on better terms now, and he's much older. He's in college now. Um, when I want fathers to think about this, when the quantity of time is decreased, we have to figure out ways to increase the quality of time. Right. So again, I'm gonna say it again. When the quantity of time is decreased, we gotta make that time count. Like, because if it's limited time we gotta make it count even more. So we gotta kind of figure out ways to increase the quality of time. So if you end up being like the weekend dad, those weekends gotta matter. You can't just, to the best of your ability, not just have your child in the house on the iPad, minding over sitting somewhere minding their business when you're doing your thing. We got to figure out ways to try to incorporate, them into our lives. If we do stuff or just, make them be the focal point and create opportunities and activities that, center them, that center the child. But I don't know. I probably was still like 2018. I probably I'm always reflective. So I was doing that like back around that I described in that post, like back around like 2013, 2014, like going up to his school. Fortunately, now I'm gonna also say this: relationship building is key, and we both know this, and relationship building is key in so many aspects of life. Even in your neighborhood, right? I was in a situation, yesterday with a couple of days ago with the young boys, right? They was playing curveball, right, outside of my house, right? And but it was like, it was a narrow space between my car and my neighbor across the street's car. So I'm like, man, these kids gonna hit my car, man. So, but because I got a relationship with them, I speak to them, I show love, I shake their hands, whatever. It was easy for me to go outside and be like, bro, like, can y'all go up the block some in that space over there? And they was like, yeah, that's cool. And I was like, thanks. And I was like, thanks. And they was like, you welcome. But if had I not had the relationship, right? Had I not taken the time to, cultivate the relationship with them, I'd be like, oh, hey, like, what? Who are you talking to? Like, a lot of times situations go left because there's no relationship, right? So the relationship building is key. So in terms of like my son's school, I had a relationship with the administrator, with the principal, I had a relationship with the staff in the front office. People knew me. Like I'm his father. So I'm not like this foreign person, you know.
Ask you because knowing your background working and you have worked in schools, what developed that mind state around let me develop this relationship with the administration, the people that work there, because that's something I've done purposefully with my children and in their schools, and I know a lot of it's come from my experience of being an administrator in schools and knowing the power of developing those relationships with those key components in your kids. Like, what led you to that?
Something I would always tell my students, like around like September of every year, when we would be about to have back to school night at wherever school I was at, I would always like encourage them highly, like heavily encourage them, like make sure you come to back to school night, bring your people, because all teachers are not created equal, right? And all teachers do not like kids. A lot of teachers like kids. A lot of teachers don't like kids, but they need that job. They like the job. They like to having their summers off. Some teachers are making a couple dollars, but they don't really like the kids, so it shows. So some teachers will kind of, they got their picks. They'll treat certain students a certain way. However, if the teacher knows, okay, this person has a family, this person has, you know, individuals, adults that care about them, that, will come in here physically and like let themselves be known, right? Then they might treat that particular child a little different, right? They might give them a little bit benefit of the doubt or whatnot. So I've seen it because I've had colleagues where I'm like, you know, I would not want, my child to be in their class. And if I was in their class, me and them would have to have a face-to-face conversation so I could establish for them, like, look, like, and my child would have to know, like, look, if you had any issues with him, we need to let me know. Let's have a conversation so I can then address him. So me kind of just, practicing what I preach, like just making myself present and letting myself be known. And also like, because one of the things that we have to do, and we talk about this all the time, like as fathers and just as men, we have to match energy with the mothers, right? And when I say that, what I mean is in a positive way, meaning oftentimes the mothers are doing the lion's share of the educational work, the academic involvement work, overall, right? There might be examples where it's not like that, but typically, well, for the most part, it's the mothers. I don't think the mothers should do less, but I think as brothers, we got to kind of step up and at least match what the women are doing and what the mothers are doing. So I've always been very big on not there not being a situation where my children's mothers are known in the school, but then I'm not. Because like, okay, well, do you have a dad? Like, like
So important. Every group of parents we talk to, every group of fathers we talk to, I make that point to say that every person that's educating your child is teaching your child. You should know them. You should have developed some type of relationship with them. They should have your communication, right? Most schools have some type of dojo or something like that, right? If they have that, make sure you're on that, right? A lot of information comes through those channels, but you want to make sure the people that's educating your child, spending a large amount of the day with your child, know who you are, what your expectations are, and like you said, that this child has someone that's physically involved in their life who will be here. And I'm not saying this in a threatening matter, right? I'm saying this in a loving matter. This kid is loved. And we know as educators, we've sat in those, you hear so much realness in those teachers' rooms. And when you at happy hour and you guys can really talk and hear what people really feel and think about some of these kids. And it's like, wow, you're teaching, right? You actually come here every day. Um, and then some of them are amazing, right? And you never get to meet them. You never get to meet this person. It's this amazing energy in your child's life that loves them and trying to help them. And it's so important, especially as fathers, because a lot of times when you go to those role books, when you go to those parent contacts, I would say 90% of those contacts are mothers. And something that I make sure, like you just said, is that my name is on that as well, right? They can get in contact with me just as much as a mom. Let me ask you, what advice would you give a father who's hesitant to show up at school because of his past conflicts or fear of being rejected uh, at the school?
Um, I mean, first I would say, that's a real thing. That's a real concern. Also, as a father, you may not have had the best relationship with school yourself when you were a child. So that may also lead you to want to be reluctant toward going to the school. But I would just say, man, it's just like a lot of things we have to do as fathers and just as men. Like, I mean, that's part of the definition of just manhood, doing the uncomfortable thing. It's comfortable. We should recognize the discomfort, and then but we got to do it anyway. We got to be courageous and be willing to be rejected. Be willing to be uncomfortable because it's not about us. It's one of the sacrifices that we're making for our children. Be willing to be uncomfortable for the sake of the child because we really and oftentimes there's a fear that of something that is not going to happen anyway. You know, you probably you know.
And oftentimes when we go in with certain ideas about situations, we what is that uh basically we create the situation is not there, right? Because we believe going in it's going to be a certain way. For as much as we just talked about people who don't care, there's a lot of people in those schools who do care. And if you're able to tap into them and they can tap into you, not only can they help the child, they can be able to help you, right? There's a lot of resources to come through schools. And I will tell any parent, especially fathers, that just go there with open minds, open heart, regardless of what your experience is. And also think about your child. If you do think this is a place that you may be intimidated by, imagine your child being there by themselves, right? Would you, as a father, want your child to be in a situation where they may be scared, or if you scared of the situation, you're allowing them to go there every day without any protection, without any type of guidance? And ultimately, when you show up as a parent, especially as a father, um, things change. People recognize that. I'll give you a good example. I was a dean with this young lady. She was in eighth grade at the time. And it was a phone situation. When I took, you get the phone back at the end of the day, give it to me, middle of the class type of thing. She refused to give it to me. And I was, okay, her mom had to come up to school. It was one of those situations. Her mom came up, but a dad came up this time. Like I'd never seen his dad. This girl didn't get in a lot of trouble, but she had a little, pizzazz with her. But the dad was there. And as we met, this is where this thought of mine started to really come into play. This was around 2016, 2015. He was upset and he said something that day. He said, you never give the school my information. I never know what's going on here, so I can help be a part of this situation. Now, there's ways he could have did that, but I was like, okay, he doesn't live with the child. There's a level of information he's not receiving about the kid in the school. And I told him I would never take a young lady's phone because I know for protection. I knew she walked home by herself. She walked past, certain projects and stuff. So I always knew that that was her communication with her mom to get home. And I told him that, and he was very upset that one that she disrespected me. He thanked me for making sure she was still protected with the phone, even though she was kind of out of order with it. Um, but what he did was take my number. This is my number, mister. This is my number. This is the best time to reach me. Anytime, leave a message. If I don't pick up, he created communication that day, and from that day forward, never had an issue with that young lady. I mean, the fact that even the little pizzazz part that she had simmered down because she now knew that this call wasn't going to her mom. It was kind of like a friend situation more than it was a motherly situation. But dad didn't play. And so often it's hard for us to unlock those dads, to find those dads. Um, but dads show up, right? If you show up, it's easier for the school to make that connection.
Yeah.
Um,
The
Let
partner
me ask you, how
key.
okay.
The partnership is key because that's,
Hmm.
as parents in general, we want to form partnerships with our children's teachers, right? Um, so that's, and part of that is, making yourself known. You got to, introduce yourself. Like one of the things I always encourage and recommend is in the beginning of the school year, when your children come home with the different syllabi from each class, you know, um, get each of the teachers emails and send a email, an introductory email. It's just something brief, nothing too crazy. Just nice to meet you. I want to introduce myself to you. I'm so and so's father. I could be reached. I look forward to them learning in your class this year. That goes a long way because most parents don't do that. So you automatically separate yourself from the crowd by doing that. It's like you making first contact. Like, and because a lot of the things that I advocate for parents to do are things that we're supposed to do as classroom teachers. Things that classroom teachers are supposed to do. We're supposed to, like, reach out to parents and whatnot. I think parents should also do the same thing. Parents should reach out to us too, because again, we're trying to form a partnership.
Exactly. So let me ask you, how can schools be more welcoming to fathers who don't live in the home, especially, you know, um, us, the brothers, right? And well, I'll say this, in communities where we know that there might not be as much uh, fathers living in the home, right? And that doesn't necessarily mean just black and brown, but in certain communities, we know that there's, less fathers in homes.
Yeah.
How can schools be more inviting than just dash with donuts, what don't usually happen at the end of the year at many schools anyway? But how can schools be more proactive in engaging fathers?
I think, well, I like the donuts for dads, but that's not enough. I think they should have different types of activities like throughout the school year. Um, Also making an effort to make sure that you have the information for both parents. A lot of unfortunately, a lot of people assume that a lot of children are in single parent households or only have one parent. I think we should assume that children have two parents. Even if they're not in a two parent household, they still have two parents. And I think we should act accordingly. Like administrators, teachers, deans, whoever. Like we should make an effort. Like, okay, I noticed that on Infinite Campus, your mom's name and information is here, but what about your dad? Where's your dad's information? I think sometimes it's like, as long as we schools kind of operate on this notion where as long as we got one parent, we just got one parent. So if the parent happens to be the mom, which in many cases it usually is, it's like, all right, we good. We check that box off. But it's like, nah, let's strive to have two parents. Like, and even if the father's not as involved, at least we tried. Like, we made a concern to say, look, we want to be able to contact both parents. And I'm gonna say this too, like, I had to check myself as a classroom teacher at one point, like probably somewhere back around like 2009, 2010, because I noticed that, like, I would like kind of joke around with my students sometimes, like when they would like misbehave a little bit or be doing too much, and I'd be like, "Yo, I'm gonna call your mom, man. Stop you drawing right now. Like, stop. Yo, I'm gonna call your mom." Then I thought about that when I was like, "Bro, like, why do I always threaten to call? Why do I never threaten to call the dad? Right?" And especially with the young brothers, because I thought about it, I was like, nah, because if you're a young man acting up in this class, I think I really want to have a conversation with your pop, right? So he knows, like, because like if your pop is anything like me, because I'm a father too, he wants to know, like, yo, his son is acting up. His son is acting in a way that he wouldn't, that would is not becoming, and that he would not want for his son to be behaving in, right? So I had to make a proactive shift in my on my own as a teacher, and stop only saying I'm gonna call your mom. I had to start threatening to like call your dad. And it was like just a shift like that, because even me, I think in my own school experience, teachers would always threaten to call the mom. Nobody would call the dad. And I'm like, why don't you call the dad? Like, let's call the dad. Like,
That's never been a threat. And one thing we noticed when we work in a lot of daycares, a lot of them, and you under resourced communities, I'll say that, where you assume these dads aren't. And every daycare we go to, they'll tell you, "Oh no, we got dads. Our dads are here." Some of the daycares in the little rougher areas are the daycares where we get the most turnouts of dads, right? Where we hear there's the most supportive dads. And I think a lot of us, when I say that, I mean in education field, we've allowed some of these stereotypes to overtake our thinking as well, just just normalizing it. Like you said, I'm gonna call mom. I always call mom. When you look for, you don't even usually look for the dad's name when you're looking at the parents' contact, right? You're not tripping in to say, "Oh, there's not a mom and a dad." It's like you said, as soon as you see the mom, you're like, "All right, cool, call the mom." There's or even a lot of times when we meet with the mom, we don't ask for the dad's information, right? So that's something as educators we need to be a lot mindful of, because most of these kids, not most of them, all of them have dads. You know what I'm saying? And a lot of them have dads that we can get in contact with. And something I've learned again is when you do get in contact with those dads, there usually is some type of difference. Especially if the dad has some type of presence in that home, right? Or in that kid's life. So
mhm.
it's definitely something that should be presented more to men, but men have to understand, kind of like what we're saying, that you don't have to sit back and wait for someone to invite you into the school where your child is. Real quick, I got my man Mr. A getting busy in this chat. I see let me say, he said, so it's important to have both parents involved if possible. If possible, it makes so much of a difference when communicating with school staff. That's true too, because two parents are usually two different communication types, right?
Yeah.
Whereas a mom or a dad may have some type of communication issue or a block with a certain staff member or with the school, the other parent may be able to facilitate those conversations a lot easier. You know what I'm saying? So there is a power in that. And something that speaking to a lady recently doing some parent surveys, and she was speaking to the fact that her and her child's father were splitting. And she said she really wanted to find a way that they could focus on the child together and just make that their focus, like not their relationship, but how can we use our children as a focus, for, as both of us just use this power to focus on them. And I thought that was so, because it was around reading and literacy, and she said maybe that's how we can work together and learn to communicate better as a family. And I think something you said earlier around, no, not earlier, I was watching one of your videos earlier, and you spoke to when the parents are separate, just focusing on the child. Like, it's not about you winning or her winning, is the child winning in this situation. And could you expand on that a little bit more? Because I think when we talk about dads being involved in the school, sometimes a parent may not want the dad involved for whatever reason, right? But this man has the great ability to navigate the school system, right? But because this, I don't want him here, I don't want him in our life type of thing may be in play, that can block that. How important is it for the parents just to focus on the kid winning, regardless of how it makes them feel?
It's very important. And I mean, but the issue a lot of times is the lack of ability to compartmentalize, like being able to say, okay, this is our relationship, or this was our relationship, and kind of put that in a box over here. and then say, okay, well, we still have to raise this child together, and then put that in another box and then focus on that, right? And I think both men and women have challenges with that. At times, I mean, I think in the past, years past, I've had challenges with that, but fortunately to focus in and kind of grow up and just focus on what is in the best interest of my child, um, whether it's one of my sons or my daughter, because that's really what it's about. It's really about the child, and it might be uncomfortable. It might be uncomfortable, but again, like if we're willing to make sacrifices for our children, then we can deal with that discomfort. And I don't think that discomfort lasts. I think it will be discomfort initially because it's a change, and change is you change the dynamic of the relationship is changing between you and this person. Um, and oftentimes, like if the mother is more involved, historically has been more involved in education, she's the one that's at the school. She may kind of look at the school as like, this is my territory, don't come in my territory, but can't look at it like that, because you want the father to be involved. You want the father to be involved in the child's life, especially educationally, because two is usually better than one.
Let me ask you something that I just thought of off of that. What about to a mother out there who may understand that the father probably is the better person to take on this education journey? And what I mean by that is making certain decisions and supporting certain things that the dad may see as a necessity or a need for their child. How important is it for that mother to understand and be able to step back, right? And say, hey, because traditionally the men don't lead there, but to understand that, hey, you know what? This man, because of his experience, because of the way maybe he was raised, he understands the level of education that I don't. Let him take this.
I mean, that's just it. That illustrates or demonstrates a certain level of maturity that
Hmm.
we don't have, and also it's an ability to kind of put your ego to the side, because unfortunately, sometimes people may see children as possessions. So if you see this
Hmm.
possession, then anything that is associated with that child or affects that child or any institutions that child is a part of or attends, you want to make unilateral decisions, especially when the
Got you.
goes left and there's no relationship anymore, and then but again, you gotta think about what's in the best interest of the child. We gotta, and then like I say, men and women, we both got to get over ourselves, and focus on what is the child. And also sometimes you know, we might convince ourselves that, oh, well, this is in the best interest of the child. And it's like, nah, that's probably not in the best interest of the child. You're trying to convince yourself that it is, just so you can, maintain this status quo. But that's not, be honest with yourself.
So let me, because something I keep asked in the chat is really and plays into one of the questions I have. Did someone tell you what to do in order to see your kids in school? And I also want to add that into something I'm asking. Do you think enough fathers know they're even allowed to show up in the ways that you spoke to showing up in schools, as far as trips or speaking in a class or shadowing or volunteering?
Oh, and that's the thing. And I think that's part of why I made the Facebook post, because I probably realized back then that, like, there's a lot of things that I do that I know that I can do just because of the benefit and the luxury of being in the education space. Like, being a teacher, being an educator, knowing how schools run, knowing how they operate, like knowing what's allowed, what's not allowed. And then, so being a parent, so being an educator, classroom teacher, but then being a parent too, it gives me a different perspective on parenting. And then also realizing that, like, a lot of people don't know, like, because the school might not, advertise that, yeah, dad, you can come do this, you can come do that. You might just not know. Like, I got inside information. So it's like
Right.
I'm trying to put people onto the game. And and a lot of things, and I'm also very big on, like as you know, like educating the community. And also that's why it makes me uncomfortable when oftentimes people will say, well, you should have knew this. And then I, to other people, and I'm like, and then they might try to use me as an example, like, well, he did it, why couldn't you do it? Well, the only reason I did it was because I knew better, because I'm kind of I'm in it. Like I'm a formal educator. That's the only reason I knew. If I wasn't, a lot of stuff that I've done in terms of engaging with schools and navigating schools, I probably wouldn't do if nobody hadn't told me. Like a lot of like that. Like if you don't know, then, nobody told you, you wouldn't know. So that's why it's important.
These men have never saw men show up for them in school, right? I love my dad to death. He spoke school. He worked at Temple so all his kids could go to school for free. My dad never once came to the school outside of football games weren't at the school, so he never showed up at the school, right? And he was the main guy pushing. You got to do good, and this and that. You going to college, all this type of stuff. But he never showed up at school. My mom was on everything. She never missed a report card, never missed a back to school night, was on the PTA, all that good stuff. But we grew from generations of men not taking on those roles, right?
Yeah.
Traditionally. And that has to change. Let me ask you, what were some of the long-term impacts of showing up at the schools in the way you did on the relationship that you saw with you and your son, and how has that grown?
So I was able to, like, create more consistency, because our custody arrangement was at that time, the court ordered custody arrangement. It wasn't to my liking. It was kind of relegated me to, being a weekend dad, which I never wanted to be, and I didn't want to be at that time. So I had to, do what I could to, ensure that I wouldn't just be the weekend dad. So that's why I end up, pulling up to the school on like random, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, or whatnot. Fortunately, this was a particular period of time when I wasn't teaching full time at that time. So I was like, I was
Okay.
doing grad school and, working part time, different programs and whatnot. So I had some flexibility in my schedule. So it was fortunate that I was able to do that, at that time.
Glad you said that because I have a saying: don't overtime yourself out your kid's life, but also being involved in a school is usually taking place when a lot of people are working, right?
Yeah.
And men have to understand. I made every supervisor, any type of boss I ever knew, had know that my kids came first, my family came first. There will be times that I will have to leave here for something. Right now, it's not like you can do this every day, but you do have time at your job, especially if you can arrange it. If you know the school play is coming up in 2 months, you can say, "Hey, on March 12th, hey, I need to come in late." You know what I'm saying? The trip is on August 20th. Every school has some type of calendar. You can look at that calendar, or you can pick a day and say, "Hey, I'm going to take off this time," because there is a part around there about being available to go to the school, right? Um, but you have to make yourself available. You have to make time to go there. You have to maybe use some PTO, some personal, sick day, to go see about your child and to go make sure that your child is good where they are and that they understand that you are a dad that will be there. Um, Kind of winding this down. Uh, there was one thing I wanted to get to. Oh, you said something about speaking and doing a presentation at your kid's school. Did you actually do that? And if you did, what was because I have a cool outcome of being able to do that at my kid's school that I never thought would come from that. But being able to speak at your kid's school, what was the outcome of that?
It helped me to I think I did it a couple times, like when my son was like in second grade, either first grade or second grade, did these like Black history presentations
Oh,
on a couple of different figures. I think I might have did one on Octavius Cato and another one on somebody else who I can't remember. But it also helped me to develop a relationship like similar to chaperoning. I developed a relationship with his classmates and his peers. So, then there was that. And then it kind of helped me to, also develop, I kind of was able to connect with the teacher, so because like I said, it's about a partnership. So I was able, kind of, kind of see how the teacher was and how they ran the classroom, and and they were able to see how I operate, and what type of background my son has, so. And then I became like a sort of like a fixture, in the building, so then I was expected to chaperone trips.
Right. It was I had my son had they had to make these persuasive arguments in class, this English class, and it was a teacher that taught my daughter for years. I had him for a few years, and they invited parents to come in, sit in, and observe these arguments. And I was sitting there, and of course, I raised my hand to a young lady had a great presentation, and I remarked on it, and the teacher was like, "Oh yeah, Mr. Johnstone is the author. He can help us, you know, blah blah blah." So afterwards, after every kid went, it came to my critique. What did I think of the kid presenting? And I would give them, my thoughts. And I actually learned a lot about my son that day because I was like, wow, this kid is a good writer. And he's thought on a different level that I didn't necessarily see him thinking on, right? Um, and afterwards, about 2 months later, he was like, Dad, all the kids in my class say you're cool.
Hmm.
And I'm like, okay, why they say I'm cool? Like, I agree with them, but why do they say I'm cool? And he said because you came and you presented that day in class and you talked about it. And I was like, oh wow, like I didn't know if they might have been something I was wearing or something like that. I didn't know why they thought I was cool. And to hear that they thought I was cool for showing up and being part of the presentation. Like it wasn't no he could play basketball, he could make jokes, he could do anything. It was that he came in class and he presented and he engaged with us, and that's the reason. And I was like, oh wow. And I had a conversation with him about why I do that and why I show up in the schools that he go to and his sisters go to. But I don't think people realize that the voice that we have and some of the perspective that we have, some of the jobs and experiences that we have that we can go in and share with kids that teachers can't, right? Teachers are teachers, right? Certain teachers can, but we have a perspective on life that's different from them, right? And we can share that with kids, and kids want to hear that. Kids definitely, kids in certain neighborhoods, they want to know how to get out. They want to know how to do better because it's not like a bunch of posters and directions saying this is how you do this, like this is how you navigate this. And they might not have seen anyone in their home or in their family navigate it to a point where they see as successful or where they want to be. You know what I'm saying? So how do you gain that knowledge from maybe people that you haven't seen do it is from the community. It's from us showing up in different ways. This little boy my son talks about all the time. He's like, yo, he thinks you're the coolest dad because of this. He thinks you're the coolest dad because of that. And I'm like, I love it, but but it's because I engage with them. Something that you talked about earlier is creating a connection, a relationship with these kids, with these the families that we're trying to work with. So everyone is down. Is there anything that you would a young father right now in a situation that he's not comfortable with, that wants to be more engaged, that wants to show up more for his child, but feels he can't? How can he use school and education one way? And what can you say to him, just brother to brother, as far as a person who's been there and who has fought through it and kind of on the other side of it now?
Yeah, just keep in mind it's a marathon, not a sprint. I mean, for
Mm.
fatherhood and parenting, just in general, it's a marathon. So in this moment, in this season, so to speak, you might feel like you might feel overwhelmed. You might feel like you're losing, but just stay in it. Stay in it, and like you might have to lose some battles. And that's the other thing too. Like when you start to focus and make your child the center, if you're having like challenges with your child's mother, then you might have to just for the benefit of your child, just like let her have that. It's like, all right, you right, you got it. As hard as it might be, because she might not actually not be right. You might be right, right? But thinking long term, what's the best what's the best, how can I create the best situation for this child, for my son or for my daughter? You may have to take that L, temporarily, so that you can be in position to do what you need to do, for your child. And also like figure out ways how to circumvent that if you're dealing with a a parent that's not really trying to co-parent, a parent that wants to kind of just be a single parent and try to figure out ways to like manufacture ways to make you irrelevant and to remove you from the picture. You just gotta, try to figure out, ways that you can still make yourself present, and going through the school is a good way to do that. Just make yourself present in the school. Um, Make sure they know you,
Right.
and also even like, while things are still cool, because if things go left, then it might be more difficult to then try to establish the relationship with the school. So, and establishing a relationship with the school is all important.
Let me ask you one thing that just came to my mind. With custody, right? However custody is determined, is there is there any issue with you showing up at the school? Like, can they say, like, does that blur a line? Does that, uh, are they saying you can't, this is your time, you can have them with you, but, you can't see them, or is it stipulations around you seeing them outside of those times that's regulated for your time to see 'em?
Well, as far as I know, so custody is broken down in two ways. There's physical custody and there's legal custody. So as long as there's in terms of legal custody, as long as you have legal custody, have at least shared legal custody of the child, then like you can have access to the child. Now, physical custody comes into play if you want to like take the child out of, and it's not, what the school should do is they should have on file a copy of the custody order. So then be responsible for, checking, to see, okay, well, is what day is today? What does the custody arrangement say? And if you're going to deviate from the custody arrangement, then the other parent has to provide some written documentation saying that that's acceptable.
Got you.
And if they,
Is that something that men should make sure the school has? Is that order to protect them,
yeah,
or is that something that's usually provided
uh,
by the courts or
you have
by
to,
the mom? Like,
one
how
of the,
can you assure that that's there?
yeah, one of the parents has to provide it. And, as a father, I mean, when you go through that process, you'll get a copy, the mother will have a copy. And, but again, it's about, being assertive. So, the mother might provide it, but don't wait for that. Don't make that assumption. So I would school and say, look, I want to make sure you have a copy of the custody order on file, right? Um, yeah, make sure you have a copy of the custody order on file. And then if they tell you, okay, we already have it on file, okay, fine. You know. Um,
Something to say it. Let me see that, John. Let me make
yeah.
sure you got it on file. All right, now I appreciate this, Akil, and I don't want to go too much longer. Appreciate your honesty, appreciate your vulnerability, sharing with us tonight as we try to help other men, fathers, and families, kids, navigate this life thing and this education thing and this engagement thing. I sent you two questions earlier today, um, that I wanted you to think on. And the first one was, if you ruled the world, um, that's it. If you ruled the world, what will be law? What will be law in Akil's ruling of the world?
Oh man, if I ruled the world, all Cadillacs would be 27 feet long with a in the back and a sunroof top.
Pimping is
Gangsta
pimping.
lean.
Ooh. Hey, let it be known. Last question. What's one musical lyric that best describes your life's journey?
See, this was more difficult. This was more difficult.
Okay.
Uh, um, the first lyric that came to mind was the Nas lyric off of Nas's Like, where he said,
Okay.
"Priests in Egypt learning something deep from their teachers." So that
Okay.
I'm trying to teach the people, things that they know, which actually, ties into my real answer for number one, which is, if I ruled the world, that everybody would have access to adequate education so that they could reach their full humanity. And we wouldn't have a society where education is actually limited and denied to people so that we can maintain um, an unequal society where you have a few haves with most of the resources and a whole bunch of have-nots, right? because the lack of education is strategically, manipulated in order to maintain that, right? Because so many people don't even know that, it's almost like, how do you know what you can do in terms of navigating a school or engaging or interacting with a school? You have to be taught that. That may be, you have to learn. It may not be just innate in you to even think to do that, right? So many things in life are like that, right? And oftentimes people are, denied information. Like, I thought about this. I'll say this real quick too. When I first was involved, like back in like 2010, involved in, my custody situation with my oldest son and his mother. And I was, learning about the system, learning about family court. And, then somebody told me about the what is it, the Curtis Law Library, which is
Hmm.
down somewhere. And then somebody told me, well, you can go there. Well, it's a couple things. The Curtis Law Library, you got to pay a fee. At least at the time, you got to pay $5 every time you go in there. Now, lawyers and law firms, they have subscriptions to it. So they, pay a yearly subscription, they go in there. So then it made me think like, okay, well, if this is where the laws are, the published laws, like the books, the law books and everything, if this purports, the people that control the society claim it's a free country, but if I want to know the law, I got to pay money. But what if I don't have the money? Then I can't find out what the law is. So then how can I navigate? How can I defend myself in a situation where I need to find out the law? Same thing with, I remember when I taught Upward Bound at Temple. And then you know how they got the law school, was it Beasley School of Law right there near Broad?
Yep.
And it was I had to go meet somebody over there, and they were like doing some type of work in there. And I was just wanted to wait in the lobby to meet. I wasn't even trying to come in. But the security guard was like real hype, like, you can't come in here unless you're a law student. So it like, I put those two experiences together, and it made me see how, okay, there's certain things in the society that are protected and coveted, and it's not meant for everybody to have access to. So the law is one of those things where they'll say, oh, you could just read, or you got access to this. Well, yeah, there's certain things you can read online, certain books you can get, but then there is some knowledge that is limited. Yeah, exactly. It's gate kept, and that's done to maintain the society the way it is. So if I rule the world, everybody would have access to the education. Now, things would be different. Because people would have a lot more opinions, and they'd be more informed opinions. So we'd have to figure out a way to manage that. But we had to figure out a way to manage that. But at least it would be. I think we'd be having some better arguments.
Well, we'll have them in 27-inch caddies. We'll have them driving around in our caddies. But now, listen, man, I appreciate you jumping on tonight, sharing what you shared with us. Hopefully, it can help some brothers. Hopefully, it can help some families. We'll love for parents, educators, anyone who works with fathers, who works with families, to share this. Right, whenever you see this, it'll be here on YouTube. Please share, please like and subscribe to the channel as we start to build this and have more of these conversations. If you think this could help someone, if you think, please share it with them. If you think this is something that you would like to talk more about, please reach out to us. If you learned something, please put it in the chat later. Or if you could give some advice around this topic when you come across this video, please add to the discussion. We appreciate everyone joining us who was on tonight. Akil. Again, thank you, brother. We look forward to doing this again. I definitely want to have a conversation with you around programming.
Yeah,
Because we both have programs, right? And a lot of times in our community, we see, say now with Philly with the young boy Qual who was just murdered, right? Popular rapper. We see a lot of emotional responses, right? And in a murder, things are going to be emotional, right? Especially a kid that was liked by so many, and being unalived the way he was. That hurts. That brings on emotional responses, but far too often that's where a lot of it stops. A lot of the energy stops after the emotional response, but what we speak to is the changes that are needed, the programming is needed, how we need to help young people, how we need to help our community. And the energy is there, but a lot of times it stops there. And sometimes we get confused with, just the corner boy hustler, right? The guy who comes around and says, I've been locked up. You don't want to go to jail. And nothing is wrong with that, right? Don't get me wrong. But aren't making a lot of these decisions to go to jail because they want to, right? A lot of these decisions are being made out of survival. A lot of them are being made out of ignorance because they don't know better. They don't know other alternatives. It's a layered situation. And what's this going to help? What's going to help is programs. It's programs that, like you focus on math. We focus on early literacy. There could be a program that focus on uh, 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 fixing cars, a program on developing next lawyers, programs on developing, I mean, working with people with how they respond to things, mental health. It's just finding out what we are best in, how we can help our community, and how we could create programs. Because one of the things I know you know, and probably have worked for, is a lot of programs in our community that's not headed by us, who are actually headed by people who interest isn't to have us be in the best situation. And that never made sense to me. Even though I pulled a lot of paychecks from some of those companies, ultimately what led to the wanting to create my own program or create a program with Akif is understanding how important program is. So I don't want to get to create another show during this show, but I definitely want to have that conversation with you around why programming in Black communities is so important for us, Black men, Black women, to control and develop for our community. So
Yeah.
again, thank you, brother. Please share this, people. If you see it, like, subscribe, hit the little bell so you get updated when we do go live again, or post some of our educational stuff for kids. So take it easy. We're gonna sign out. Good night, everybody. I'll talk to you later. Akil. Appreciate you tonight, bro.
All right, bro.
Yep. Take care.